What if I told you that everything you think you know about medieval life is wrong? That the people of 1347 England weren't dirty, disease-ridden peasants stumbling through a dark age, but were instead part of a sophisticated society with complex daily rhythms, intricate social customs, and a deep connection to the natural world that we've completely lost? Tonight, we're stepping back 677 years to experience a single day in medieval England, from sunrise to the deep of night, through the eyes of ordinary people living extraordinary lives. This is a journey designed to help you sleep, so settle in, close your eyes, and let the gentle pace of medieval life carry you away from the modern world. It's March 15th, 1347. The Black Death hasn't yet reached England's shores. Edward III sits on the throne, and the 100 Years' War rages in France. But here, in the small village of Ashwell in Hertfordshire, life continues with the ancient rhythms that have governed human existence for centuries. The sun is just beginning to pierce the early morning mist that clings to the thatched roofs of timber-framed cottages. Smoke rises from chimneys as families wake to begin another day, governed not by clocks, for they have none, but by the sun, the seasons, and the bells of St. Mary's Church. You are about to experience this world through multiple perspectives. A farmer named William, his wife Margaret, their young son Thomas, and Eleanor, the wife of the village's prosperous wool merchant. Through their eyes, you'll discover what it truly meant to be alive in medieval England. Let the stress of your modern day fade away as we enter a world where time moved differently, where community bonds were stronger, and where the simple act of living was both harder and, in many ways, more meaningful than anything we know today. The natural alarm clock, the rooster's crow, echoes across the village just as the first pale light of dawn touches the eastern horizon. But William the farmer was already awake, not from an alarm, but from the natural rhythm of a body aligned with the sun's cycle. In the darkness of their one-room cottage, William lies on a straw mattress covered with rough woolen blankets. Beside him, his wife Margaret stirs as their young son Thomas shifts in his sleep between them. The air is cold March in England, carries winter, spite, and their breath forms, small clouds in the dim light filtering through the single-oiled parchment window. This is the end of what medieval people called second sleep. For William's family, like everyone in their time, sleep didn't come in one 8-hour block as we know it today. They slept for 4 hours, woke naturally around midnight for an hour or two of quiet activity prayer, tending the fire, intimate conversation, then slept again until dawn. William rises carefully, trying not to wake his family, though Margaret's eyes open at his movement. She smiles in the dim light, a wordless communication between partners who have shared 23 years of marriage, 15 years in this very cottage. The morning rituals. William's first task is the fire. The hearth at the center of their main room contains embers that have been carefully banked through the night. Fire is precious. Starting one from scratch with flint and steel is difficult and time-consuming work. These embers represent continuity, warmth, and survival. He kneels beside the stone hearth, adding small twigs and dry straw to coax the embers back to flame. The fire catches, and suddenly the room is filled with dancing light and the comforting crackle of burning wood. The smoke rises through a simple hole in the thatched roof. Their chimney is nothing more than this opening that allows smoke to escape while keeping rain out. Margaret rises and crosses herself, whispering the morning prayer her mother taught her. In nomen Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Then she adds her own words. Lord, grant us this day our daily bread, protect our family from harm, and bless the work of our hands. These aren't empty rituals, but essential preparations for facing a world filled with uncertainties, crop failure, disease, violence, and forces beyond human control. Faith provides structure, comfort, and the hope necessary to continue. The cottage interior. As light grows stronger, we can see their world more clearly. The cottage is small perhaps, 20 feet by 15 feet, but every inch serves multiple purposes. The main room functions as kitchen, workshop, dining area, and gathering space. Wooden bowls, iron cooking pots, and simple tools hang from hooks on the walls. The floor is packed earth, covered with rushes and herbs, meadowsweet, lavender, and rosemary that Margaret spreads to freshen the air and provide insulation from the cold ground below. These rushes are replaced seasonally, and the old ones composted for their small garden. A wooden ladder leads to a small loft where they store grain, wool, and other valuable supplies. This loft also serves as sleeping space during the coldest winter months, when the rising heat from the fire below makes it the warmest spot in the house. Their possessions are few but precious. A large iron pot for cooking, wooden bowls and spoons carved by William during long winter evenings, Margaret's distaffs for spinning wool into thread, a small collection of iron tools, and their most valuable possession, a beautifully illuminated prayer book inherited from Margaret's father, who had learned to read from the village priest. Thomas awakens. 8-year-old Thomas wakes to the sound and warmth of the growing fire. At his age, he already has responsibilities that would surprise modern children. His day will include feeding the chickens, collecting eggs, helping his father with various farming tasks, and learning the skills he'll need as an adult. But childhood still exists in medieval England, even if it's different from our modern conception. Thomas has a collection of carved wooden animals, a leather ball stuffed with wool, and in summer, he joins other village children in games of hide and seek, mock battles with wooden swords, and swimming in the river that flows past Ashwell. Margaret helps Thomas dress in his woolen tunic, rough but warm, dyed a pleasant brown with walnut hulls. His feet go into simple leather shoes that William crafted last autumn. In summer, Thomas often goes barefoot, but March's cold demands protection. The first meal medieval people typically ate 2 main meals, a light breakfast and a larger dinner in mid to late afternoon. This morning meal is simple, but nourishing bread baked from their own wheat, ale safer than water and nutritious, and perhaps some cheese or eggs if the chickens have been productive. The bread is dark and hearty, made from wheat mixed with barley and oats. It's coarser than modern bread, but rich with nutrients. Margaret bakes once a week in the communal village oven, a large stone structure maintained by the entire community and used by families in rotation. The ale is mild, much weaker than modern beer, and is the primary beverage for all family members, including children. Water sources in medieval England are often contaminated, but the brewing process makes ale both safe and nutritious. It's flavored with herbs, sometimes hops, but more often a mixture called groot that might include bog myrtle, yarrow, or wild rosemary. Margaret's morning tasks. While William prepares for his day in the fields, Margaret begins her own complex routine. Medieval women managed households that were essentially small businesses, producing most of what the family needed to survive. Her first task is checking on their livestock. Behind the cottage, in a small enclosed yard, they keep 6 chickens, a pig, and 2 sheep. The chickens provide eggs and occasional meat. The pig will be slaughtered in autumn to provide winter protein, and the sheep give wool that Margaret spins into thread and weaves into cloth. She scatters grain for the chickens, checks their nesting boxes for eggs, and gives the pig scraps from yesterday's meals mixed with whey left over from cheese making. The sheep need fresh straw and water, and she examines them carefully for signs of illness or injury that might require treatment. Margaret is skilled in herbal medicine knowledge, passed down from her mother and grandmother. She knows which plants treat fever, which help with digestion, which speed the healing of cuts and bruises. This knowledge isn't superstition, but practical healthcare in a world without doctors or hospitals. St. Mary's Bell. As the sun climbs higher, the bronze bell of St. Mary's Church begins to ring, calling the faithful to prime. the first of the daily prayer services that structure medieval life. The sound carries across the entire village, a voice of bronze that speaks of community, faith, and the passage of time. William pauses in harnessing his ox to listen to the bell. He can't read, but he doesn't need to. The bells tell time more accurately than any clock. Prime means the sun is well up, the working day has begun, and it's time to join his neighbors in the common fields that surround Ashwell. Not everyone attends every service. The demands of daily life, especially during planting and harvest seasons, make that impossible. But the bells provide rhythm and structure to days that might otherwise blur together in the endless cycle of agricultural work. The village layout. Ashwell in 1347 is a prosperous village of perhaps 300 souls, laid out in the pattern common to English settlements. The church sits at the heart of the community, its stone tower visible from miles away. Around it cluster the cottages of the villagers, each with its small garden plot where families grow vegetables, herbs, and keep their animals. Beyond the village proper stretch the open fields where the community grows its grain. This isn't the enclosed, privately owned farmland of later centuries, but a communal system where families hold rights to farm strips of land scattered throughout large, shared fields. William holds rights to farm 12 strips of land, totaling about 15 acres, enough to support his family in good years, tight in poor ones. Some strips lie in the best soil near the river, others on the hillsides where drainage is better, but the ground harder to work. This scattered system ensures that no family gets stuck with only poor land, and it encouraged cooperation since neighbor strips lie side by side. Eleanor's different world, while William prepares for fieldwork. Eleanor, wife of successful wool merchant Edmund, begins her day in very different circumstances. Their house is larger 3 rooms instead of 1, and built of stone rather than timber and daub. Edmund's success in the wool trade has brought prosperity that sets the family apart from most villagers. Eleanor wakes in a proper bed with a feather mattress, linen sheets, and woolen blankets dyed rich blue with woad. Her morning begins with private prayer in a small chamber that serves as their chapel, where a beautiful carved crucifix watches over her devotions. Her day will involve managing their household staff, 2 servants, who help with cooking, cleaning, and the complex work of processing wool, and overseeing their larger garden where vegetables, herbs, and fruit trees provide variety unknown in poorer households. But Eleanor's life isn't one of idle luxury. She's responsible for the complex task of turning raw wool into finished cloth, supervising the washing, combing, spinning, and weaving that transforms sheep as fleece into valuable fabric that Edmund sells in markets throughout England, and even to merchants from Flanders and Italy. The wool trade. Wool is England's primary export in 1347, bringing wealth that flows from great lords down to successful merchants like Edmund. The finest English wool is prized throughout Europe for its length, strength, and ability to take dyes beautifully. Eleanor understands every step of wool processing. She can judge the quality of fleeces by touch, knows which sheep produce the best fibers, and supervises the complex chemistry of dyeing using madder root for reds, weld for yellows, woad for blues, and dozens of other plants and minerals to create the colors that make English cloth famous. This morning, she examines the fleeces that arrived yesterday from a matter 20 miles away. Her trained hands feel for length of fiber, softness, and the natural oils that indicate healthy sheep. She'll purchase the best fleeces, rejecting any that show signs of disease, poor nutrition, or careless shearing. Village social structure. The differences between William's and Eleanor's mornings illustrate the complex social hierarchy of medieval England. William is a villain, not quite a slave, but tied to the land and obligated to work several days each week on the Lord Domain, private land, in addition to farming his own strips. Edmund, by contrast, is a freeman. His success in trade has brought not just wealth, but social mobility. He owns his house and land outright, pays taxes directly to the king rather than owing labor service to a lord, and has the right to travel freely throughout England in pursuit of business. Yet both families are part of the same community. Their children play together, they worship in the same church, and in times of crisis, poor harvests, disease, or threats from outside, they depend on each other for survival. Medieval society may be hierarchical, but it's also deeply interconnected. The Lord's Manor, beyond the village, on a hill overlooking the common fields, stands the manor house where Sir Geoffrey de Ashwell lives with his family and retainers. This isn't the massive castle of romantic imagination, but a substantial stone house surrounded by gardens, workshops, and defensive walls. Sir Geoffrey is a knight who holds the village of Ashwell from the Earl of Hertford, who in turn holds it from the king. This feudal chain creates obligations that flow up and down, sir. Geoffrey owes military service to the Earl to the king, while the villagers owe labor and produce to Sir Geoffrey. But feudalism is more than just exploitation. Sir Geoffrey is responsible for defending the village, providing justice through his manor court, maintaining the roads and bridges, and ensuring food security during bad harvests. When bandits threaten, when disputes arise between neighbors, or when royal tax collectors arrive, the villagers look to Sir Geoffrey for protection and leadership. Morning work begins. As the church bell falls silent, the village comes fully to life. William leads his ox toward the common fields, where he'll spend the day plowing. The ox is a massive creature, bred for strength rather than speed, capable of breaking even heavy clay soil that would defeat a horse. Margaret begins her daily round of tasks, spinning wool into thread on her distaff, tending their small garden where she grows onions, leeks, cabbages, and herbs, and preparing the main meal that the family will eat when William returns from the fields. Thomas joins a group of children tasked with watching the village geese and pigs as they forage in the common, areas, forest edges, and meadows where everyone has the right to let their animals feed. This isn't just childcare, but essential economic activity, ensuring that livestock stay healthy while preventing them from damaging crops. Eleanor supervises her servants as they begin the day's wool processing, carefully combing yesterday's purchases to remove vegetable matter and align the fibers for spinning. The rhythmic sound of combs scraping through wool creates a steady background music that will continue throughout the day. In the fields with William, by mid-morning, William is deep in the rhythm of plowing. His ox, a patient beast named Brownie, pulls the heavy wooden plow through soil that's been softened by March rains. The plowshare, the only iron part of the implement, cuts through earth and turns it over, burying weeds and last year's stubble while exposing fresh soil to air and light. This isn't solitary work. The open field system means that William plows alongside his neighbors. They're strips of land running parallel in long, narrow plots. Robert the miller works the strip to his left, while John the carpenter's son plows to his right. They exchange greetings, share observations about soil conditions, and help each other when equipment breaks or oxen prove stubborn. The conversation flows easily between practical matters and village news. Robert mentions that his youngest daughter showed signs of fever yesterday, a constant worry in an age when childhood diseases can be fatal. John shares news from his recent trip to the market town of Royston, where he heard rumors of renewed fighting in France and rising grain prices. These conversations aren't idle chatter, but essential information sharing. In a world without newspapers, television, or internet, news travels by word of mouth. Knowing about weather patterns in neighboring villages, market prices in distant towns, or political developments that might affect taxes or military service can mean the difference between prosperity and hardship. The technology of medieval farming, William's plow, represents centuries of agricultural innovation. The heavy plow, introduced to England centuries earlier, revolutionized farming by making it possible to cultivate the rich, heavy soils that light plows couldn't handle. This single innovation helped create the agricultural surplus that supports medieval civilization. The plow itself is a marvel of medieval engineering. The wooden share cuts vertically into the soil, while the mold board turns it over. The coulter, a knife-like blade, cuts the soil in advance of the plowshare. Everything is designed for efficiency and durability, crafted by village carpenters and blacksmiths, who understand both the mechanics of farming and the properties of local materials. Brownie, the ox, is equally important. These animals are bred specifically for agricultural work, stronger than horses, more sure-footed, and capable of surviving on rougher feed. An ox like Brownie represents a significant investment equivalent to perhaps 6 months of William S. income, but also the foundation of his family's economic survival. Margaret's domestic workshop. Back in the cottage, Margaret's morning has transformed their main room into a busy workshop. She sits beside the fire, her distaff loaded with wool, drawing out fibers and twisting them into strong, even thread. Her hands move with practiced skill developed over decades of daily spinning. This isn't busy work or a hobby, but essential economic production. The thread Margaret spins will be woven into cloth for her family's clothing, or sold to merchants like Edmund for cash income. A skilled spinner like Margaret can produce thread worth several pence per day, significant money in an economy where a laborer might earn 4 pence for a full day's work. The spinning wheel hasn't yet been invented. So Margaret uses a simple spindle and distaff tools that have remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. The distaff holds the raw wool, while the spindle twists and wings the finished thread. It's portable technology that allows her to work while watching Thomas, tending the fire, or supervising cooking. While her hands work with the wool, Margaret's mind plans the day ahead. The bread she baked yesterday is running low. She'll need to start another batch this afternoon for baking tomorrow. Their last hen started laying again after the winter break, adding precious eggs to their diet. The pig looks ready for breeding. She needs to arrange with neighbor Robert, whose boar serves the entire village. The village children Thomas and his friends have driven the geese and pigs to a meadow beside the river where fresh grass is beginning to appear despite March's chill. Watching livestock might sound like simple work, but it requires knowledge, skill, and constant attention. The children must know which plants are safe for the animals to eat and which might be poisonous. They watch for signs of illness or injury that could affect valuable animals. They keep the geese from wandering too far while ensuring the pigs don't damage farmers' field boundaries. But there's play mixed with work. The boys practice with wooden swords, mimicking the knights they see when Sir Geoffrey's retainers ride through the village. The girls weave flowers into crowns and play elaborate games of make-believe where they re-noble ladies in distant castles. Alice, Robert the miller's daughter, teaches the younger children a game passed down from her grandmother, a clapping song with verses that tell the story of King Arthur and his knights. These aren't just entertainment, but cultural transmission, passing down stories, values, and shared identity from one generation to the next. Eleanor's business activities. Eleanor's morning has focused on the technical aspects of wool processing, but now she turns to the business side of their operation. She meets with John the carter, who transports goods between Ashwell and London, to arrange shipping for the finished cloth her household has produced. This is complex negotiation, requiring detailed knowledge of markets, transportation costs, and seasonal demand patterns. Eleanor must judge when to sell for quick profit versus holding inventory for higher prices later. She needs to balance the risk of price fluctuations against the security of immediate payment. The cloth she's selling represents months of work by her household. Raw wool was purchased, cleaned, combed, spun into thread, woven into fabric, and finished with techniques that give English cloth its reputation for quality. Each step added value and required skill, timing, and judgment. John the carter quotes prices for transport to London 2 pence per pound for cloth, with additional costs for packaging and insurance against loss or theft. Eleanor calculates quickly. Her current inventory weighs about 50 pounds, and should sell for at least 40 shillings in London markets, leaving substantial profit even after transportation costs. The midday meal. As the sun reaches its highest point, work rhythms slow for the main meal of the day. Medieval people typically eat two substantial meals, a light breakfast and this midday dinner, with perhaps a small supper in the evening if food supplies allow. William returns from the fields to find Margaret has prepared a substantial meal. The main dish is pottage, a thick stew of grains, vegetables, and whatever protein is available. Today's version contains barley, onions, leeks, and small pieces of bacon from the pig they slaughtered last autumn. The pottage cooks slowly in their large iron pot, developing complex flavors as ingredients blend and concentrate. Margaret seasons it with herbs from her garden, parsley, thyme, and sage, and adds salt. A precious commodity, it must be purchased from traveling merchants. They eat from wooden bowls with wooden spoons, sitting on simple stools around a rough table. There are no forks, not yet invented for dining, so bread serves as both food and utensil, soaking up the thick pottage and providing substance to the meal. Eleanor's household dines quite differently. Their table is covered with a linen cloth, and they eat from pewter dishes rather than wood. Their pottage contains more meat, beef, mutton, and poultry, and is seasoned with expensive spices like pepper and ginger that Edmund imports through his trade connections. But both families share the same fundamental relationship with food. It's precious, never wasted, and always appreciated. Even Eleanor, as prosperous household, lives close enough to scarcity to understand that full bellies are blessings not to be taken for granted. After the midday meal, the village enters its most social phase of the day. Work continues, but at a more leisurely pace that allows for conversation, cooperation, and the informal exchanges that bind the community together. William returns to his plowing, but now he's joined by his teenage nephew Peter, visiting from a neighboring village. Peter will work alongside William for several days, learning advanced plowing techniques while providing extra labor during the crucial spring season. This informal apprenticeship system ensures that knowledge passes between generations and that young men develop the skills they need to support their own families. The afternoon sun has warmed the soil, making the plowing easier. Brownie moves steadily along the furrows, and William can focus less on forcing the plow through heavy earth and more on the precision of his work ensuring straight furrows, proper depth, and complete coverage of his strips. At the center of Ashwell, around the church and the market cross, villagers gather throughout the afternoon for the informal business that keeps the community functioning. This isn't scheduled activity, but organic social interaction that serves multiple purposes. Margaret arrives with her basket of thread, ready to trade with Eleanor for finished cloth or raw materials. But she also comes for news, companionship, and the simple pleasure of adult conversation after a morning spent largely alone with her work. She greets Emma, the baker's wife, who shares concerning news about her husband's persistent cough. Margaret offers to prepare an herbal remedy, horehound and honey, that helped her own father with similar symptoms. This exchange of medical knowledge happens constantly in medieval villages, where folk medicine and women's healing traditions provide the primary healthcare system. Sarah, wife of the village reeve overseer, mentions that Sir Geoffrey has announced plans to improve the village's main road before autumn. This means additional labor obligations for the men, but also better access to markets and easier transport for merchants like Edmund. News like this affects everyone's planning and highlights the interconnected nature of medieval economic life. Eleanor spends her afternoon managing the complex social obligations that come with her family's prosperity. Wealth brings not just comfort, but responsibility to the broader community, and Eleanor takes these duties seriously. She visits Agnes, an elderly widow whose husband died last winter, bringing food and checking on her welfare. Agnes has no children and limited means of support, making her dependent on community charity. Eleanor's visit isn't just kindness, but part of the social safety net that helps vulnerable community members survive. Eleanor also stops at the cottage of Maria, whose husband broke his leg in a farming accident 2 weeks ago. While he recovers, the family struggles with lost income and accumulated work. Eleanor offers to hire Maria for temporary spinning work, providing income while helping her own household meet production goals. These visits serve multiple purposes: maintaining social relationships, gathering information about community needs, and reinforcing the bonds that hold medieval society together. Eleanor's prosperity gives her influence and responsibility that she exercises carefully, knowing that community support during her own future troubles may depend on how generously she treats others now. The sound of hammer on anvil draws attention to the blacksmith's shop, where master craftsman Henry works with his 2 apprentices to provide the metal tools that make medieval life possible. This afternoon, he's repairing William's plowshare, damaged by a hidden stone in the field. The blacksmith's shop is the technological heart of the village. Henry can create and repair everything from horseshoes and cooking pots to weapons and agricultural implements. His forge burns at temperatures that transform raw iron into precisely crafted tools, and his skill determines the effectiveness of much of the village's equipment. William waits while Henry heats the damaged plowshare to orange-hot temperature, then hammers it back into shape on the anvil. The work requires perfect timing to cool, and the iron won't move properly. Too hot, and it becomes brittle and weak. Henry's apprentices work the bellows that keep the fire at proper temperature, while learning the complex skills they alone need as independent craftsmen. This repair represents more than just fixing a tool. The plowshare is essential for William's farming, and without it, he can't complete the spring planting that will feed his family through the coming year. Henry's skill literally determines whether families eat or go hungry, making the blacksmith one of the most respected and essential members of the community. The afternoon also brings activity to Robert the miller's domain beside the river. The water wheel that powers his grinding stones creates constant motion and sound that can be heard throughout the village. Today, several families bring grain to be processed into flour payment, for which provides Robert's primary income. Medieval milling is highly regulated. Sir Geoffrey, as lord of the manor, owns the mill and requires all villagers to bring their grain here, rather than grinding it themselves or traveling to other mills. Robert pays rent to Sir Geoffrey for the right to operate the mill, then charges villagers for processing their grain. This system ensures quality control. Robert's mill produces consistent flour that meets community standards while providing income for both the miller and the manor lord. But it also represents the feudal obligations that bind medieval society together, where individual economic choices are limited by community and lordship arrangements. Eleanor arrives with several sacks of grain, payment for which will be flour of different qualities: fine white flour for her household's bread, coarser flour for her servants, and bran that will feed their livestock. Robert examines the grain carefully, checking for moisture content, weed seeds, and signs of disease that could affect the quality of finished flour. While adults work, the village children continue their informal education through observation, participation, and play. Thomas has returned from watching livestock and now helps his father with minor tasks, scaring water for the ox, clearing stones from furrows, and learning through hands-on experience the skills he'll need as an adult farmer. But education in medieval villages extends beyond practical skills. Father Benedict, the village priest, gathers children in the church for lessons in Christian doctrine, basic literacy for those who show aptitude, and moral instruction that shapes their understanding of right and wrong. Today's lesson focuses on the story of the Good Samaritan, but Father Benedict connects the parable to contemporary village life. He asks the children to think about how they can help neighbors in need, how they should treat strangers, and what responsibilities they have to the broader community. Some children, particularly boys, from prosperous families, like Eleanor's son Richard, receive more advanced instruction. Richard can read Latin well enough to follow Mass, write basic accounts for his father's business, and calculate the measurements and costs involved in wool trading. March afternoons also focus attention on the seasonal transitions that govern agricultural life. William examines his grain stores, calculating how long current supplies will last and whether he needs to purchase additional seed for spring planting. Margaret checks her herb garden for signs of new growth, the early shoots of parsley, chives, and other hardy plants that survived winter and now promise fresh flavors and medicines for the coming season. She also plans her expanded garden for the growing season, deciding where to plant cabbages, onions, and the other vegetables that supplement their grain-based diet. Eleanor reviews her household's wool inventory, deciding which fleeces to process immediately and which to hold for processing later in the year when prices might be higher. She also plans for the sheep shearing season that will begin in late spring, when her household will be busy with the intensive work of processing the year's wool clip. These seasonal rhythms create continuity and predictability in medieval life. Each month brings specific tasks, challenges, and opportunities, while the cycle of seasons provides the basic framework around which all other activities are organized. As afternoon shadows lengthen, the village begins its transition toward evening. The sun, which has warmed the March air throughout the day, now slants lower, creating longer shadows and reminding everyone that darkness and the end of productive work approaches. William completes his day's plowing and begins the careful process of unharnessing Brownie. The ox has worked steadily since morning and deserves proper care. William checks the animal's hooves for stones or injuries, examines the harness for wear that might cause problems tomorrow, and leads the patient beast to the village common, where it will graze overnight with the other oxen. The ox represents a significant portion of William's wealth, perhaps worth more than everything else he owns combined. Proper care isn't just kindness, but economic necessity. A lame or injured ox could mean crop failure and hunger for his entire family. As William walks Brownie to the common, he meets other farmers completing the same ritual. The village's dozen oxen will spend the night together, watched over by young men who take turns ensuring no wolves or thieves threaten the valuable animals. This communal care system reduces individual risk while building the cooperative bonds that hold medieval society together. Margaret's evening preparations back at the cottage. Margaret begins the complex preparations that will carry her family through the night. Evening in a medieval household requires careful planning. There are no electric lights to extend productivity, no gas stoves to provide instant heat, no refrigeration to preserve food safely. Her first priority is banking the fire properly for the night ahead. The flames that have burned brightly throughout the day must be reduced to glowing embers. That will provide warmth without consuming too much fuel or creating fire hazards while the family sleeps. Margaret arranges the logs carefully, covers them with ash to slow burning, and ensures enough air circulation to prevent the fire from dying completely. The evening meal requires different preparation than midday dinner. With daylight fading and no artificial lighting beyond candles or oil lamps, both expensive, the food must be simple but satisfying. Margaret prepares bread, cheese, and ale, along with any leftovers from the midday pottage. She also checks their food stores, calculating how long current supplies will last and planning tomorrow's meals. March is a difficult time in the medieval calendar. Winter stores are running low, but new crops won't be ready for months. Careful management now prevents hunger later. The children's evening tasks. Thomas returns from his afternoon activities with specific responsibilities that contribute to household survival. He gathers eggs from their chickens, ensuring they're collected before darkness brings predators that might steal them. He also brings firewood from the woodpile behind the cottage, small logs and kindling that will feed tomorrow as fire. These aren't arbitrary chores, but essential training in the skills Thomas will need as an adult. By age 8, he already understands the daily rhythms of household management, the care of livestock, and the seasonal cycles that govern rural life. Every task teaches lessons that will serve him throughout his life. The village children also gather for the informal games and storytelling that mark the transition from work to rest. Today, Alice the Miller's daughter shares a tale her grandmother told her, the story of a brave knight who defeated a terrible dragon to save a village much like their own. These stories aren't just entertainment, but cultural transmission, passing down values, heroes, and moral lessons that shape the children's understanding of the world. The tales often blend Christian themes with older folk traditions, creating a rich narrative tradition that helps define community identity. Eleanor's social obligations. Eleanor's evening focuses on the social responsibilities that come with her family as prominent position in the village. She visits the cottage of old Martha, a widow whose children died in a plague outbreak 5 years ago. Martha now lives alone on the charity of neighbors, and Eleanor's regular visits provide both material support and human companionship. Eleanor brings Martha bread, cheese, and a small jar of honey-precious commodities that demonstrate care and respect. But she also brings news, conversation, and the simple comfort of human presence. In a world where most people live in families or communities, isolation can be as dangerous as hunger or cold. These visits aren't optional social calls, but moral obligations that Eleanor takes seriously. Medieval Christian teaching emphasized care for widows, orphans, and the poor as essential expressions of faith. Eleanor's prosperity brings not just comfort, but responsibility to help those less fortunate. She also stops to speak with Father Benedict about plans for the upcoming Easter celebration. As one of the wealthier women in the village, Eleanor will contribute significantly to the feast that follows Easter Mass, providing expensive spices, fine cloth for decorating the church, and coordinated organization of the community celebration. As evening deepens, villagers naturally gather around the church and market cross for the informal socializing that ends each day. This isn't planned activity, but organic community building that serves multiple social and economic functions. Men discuss the day's work, sharing observations about soil conditions, weather patterns, and the progress of spring planting. They also exchange news from outside the village, reports from travelers, messages from nearby communities, and rumors about political developments that might affect their lives. Women share information about household management, child rearing, and the folk medicine that provides most of their health care. They trade remedies for common ailments, discuss the behavior of children and livestock, and maintain the social networks that help families survive crisis and hardship. Young people use these gatherings for courtship and social connection. Medieval marriage involves practical considerations, land rights, inheritance, and economic cooperation, but personal attraction and compatibility also matter. These evening gatherings provide opportunities for young men and women to interact under community supervision. As darkness approaches, the village begins its transformation from the practical world of daily work to the mysterious realm of night. Medieval people understood that darkness brought different rules, different dangers, and different possibilities than the daylight world they knew. Father Benedict rings the church bell for Vespers, the evening prayer service that marks the formal transition from day to night. The bronze voice carries across the village, calling the faithful to worship and reminding everyone of the spiritual protection they need during the vulnerable hours ahead. Some villagers attend the service, kneeling in the candlelit church while Father Benedict chants the ancient prayers that have marked Christian evenings for centuries. Others pray privately in their homes, whispering familiar words that provide comfort and protection against the uncertainties of night. The prayers aren't just spiritual exercises, but practical preparations for sleep in a world filled with real dangers. Disease, fire, theft, and violence are constant threats, while the medieval imagination also populated the darkness with supernatural entities, demons, ghosts, and malicious spirits that preyed upon the unwary. As natural light fades, Families must decide how much artificial lighting they can afford. Candles made from tallow, animal fat, cost significant money, perhaps an hour's wages for a laborer. Beeswax candles are even more expensive, usually reserved for churches or the wealthiest households. Most families rely on rushlights reeds soaked in animal fat that burn with a dim, smoky flame. These provide enough light for essential tasks, but consume less expensive materials than proper candles. Oil lamps offer another option, burning animal or vegetable oils in simple clay or metal containers. The scarcity and expense of artificial lighting profoundly shapes medieval evening activities. Work that requires good vision must be completed before dark. Reading, writing, and detailed crafts become expensive luxuries. Most evening activities involve conversation, storytelling, prayer, or simple tasks that can be performed by touch or in dim light. William returns from settling Brownie and securing his farming tools for the night. Medieval theft is a serious problem, and valuable implements like plows, harnesses, and metal tools must be properly secured or hidden to prevent losses that could devastate a family's economic survival. Inside the cottage, Margaret has prepared their simple evening meal. The family sits together around the fire, sharing food and conversation that strengthens the bonds holding them together. Thomas tells his parents about the day's adventures with the other children, while William and Margaret discuss plans for tomorrow's work and the progress of spring planting. These conversations aren't casual chat, but essential family business. Medieval households function as economic units where every member contributes to survival and prosperity. Thomas needs to understand his role and responsibilities, while William and Margaret must coordinate their activities to ensure nothing essential is forgotten or overlooked. After eating, the family engages in the evening activities that mark the transition towards sleep. Margaret continues her spinning by firelight, producing thread that will contribute to the family's income. William might repair tools or equipment, performing maintenance that prevents future problems. Thomas plays quiet games or listens to his parents' conversation, gradually becoming drowsy as the fire burns lower and the cottage grows darker. Medieval children often fall asleep naturally beside the fire, then are carried to their sleeping places by parents who understand that rest comes easier when it is not forced. As full darkness approaches, the village implements informal security measures that protect the community through the vulnerable hours of night. Young men take turns watching the livestock on the common, ensuring that valuable oxen, horses, and sheep aren't stolen by thieves or killed by wolves. The church remains open throughout the night, providing sanctuary for anyone who feels threatened or unsafe. Father Benedict often stays late, praying privately or counseling villagers who seek spiritual guidance during times of crisis or uncertainty. Families secure their homes as best they can, barring doors, shuttering windows, and ensuring that valuable items are hidden or protected. Medieval houses offer limited security, but thieves usually prefer easier targets and well-prepared households in villages where everyone knows their neighbors. The village also maintains informal watch systems where neighbors keep alert for signs of trouble, unusual noises, suspicious strangers, or the outbreak of fires that could spread quickly through communities built largely of wood and thatch. As the last light fades from the western sky, medieval Ashwell undergoes its daily transformation from the world of work and community to the realm of rest and dreams. This transition isn't simply a matter of becoming tired. It is a sacred passage that medieval people approached with rituals, prayers, and careful attention to both physical and spiritual preparation. William's family begins their nightly routine as the fire burns lower in the hearth. Margaret adds a large log to the coals, not to create bright flames, but to ensure glowing embers will survive until morning. Fire is too precious and difficult to restart to let it die completely, yet it must burn safely through the long hours when no one will tend it. The cottage fills with the soft, warm light of burning embers, creating an atmosphere that seems to exist outside of time. This gentle illumination will gradually fade as the family sleeps, but for now, it provides enough light for the careful preparations that precede rest in the medieval world. Thomas is the first to prepare for sleep. At 8 years old, he's reached the age where he has his own small responsibilities in the bedtime routine. But he still needs his parents' guidance and protection. Margaret helps him out of his woolen day clothes, checking his body for cuts, bruises, or signs of illness that might require attention. Medieval parents examine their children carefully each night, not from excessive worry, but from practical necessity. In a world without modern medicine, small injuries can become serious infections. While diseases often announce themselves through subtle changes in skin color, temperature, or energy levels, early detection and treatment using herbal remedies and folk medicine can mean the difference between quick recovery and serious illness. Margaret whispers a quiet prayer as she helps Thomas into his sleeping clothes, simple linen shirt that serves as both underwear and nightwear. The prayer asks for protection through the night, health and strength for tomorrow, and blessings on the entire family. These aren't empty words, but heartfelt petitions for divine care during the vulnerable hours of sleep. Thomas climbs onto the family's sleeping area, a large mattress stuffed with fresh straw and covered with woolen blankets that Margaret wove herself. The mattress lies on a wooden platform raised slightly above the earthen floor, providing insulation from cold and dampness that could cause illness. As Thomas settles into sleep, William and Margaret share the quiet intimacy that marks the end of their shared day. This is simply physical closeness, but emotional and spiritual connection that strengthens their marriage and helps them face the challenges of medieval life together. They speak quietly about the day's events, sharing observations and concerns that couldn't be discussed while working. William mentions his worries about the weather march has been wetter than usual, which could delay planting if the fields don't dry soon. Margaret shares her concerns about their dwindling food stores and the need to trade some of their remaining wool for grain. These conversations aren't complaints, but practical planning sessions, where husband and wife coordinate their efforts and support each other through difficulties. Medieval marriage involves deep economic cooperation, and successful couples like William and Margaret function as true partners in the complex work of survival and prosperity. They also share moments of tenderness that remind them why they chose to build a life together. William thanks Margaret for the excellent pottage she prepared for dinner, while she acknowledges his hard work in the fields that provides their basic security. These small expressions of gratitude and recognition help maintain the emotional bonds that make medieval marriage more than just economic arrangement. Before lying down to sleep, both William and Margaret engage in private prayer, not the formal communal worship of church services, but intimate conversation with God that seeks protection, guidance, and grace for their family. Margaret kneels beside their bed, her hands folded before a small wooden crucifix that hangs on the wall above their sleeping place. She whispers the familiar words of the Ave Maria and Pater Noster, but she also adds her own personal petitions for Thomas's health and growth, for successful crops in the coming season, for protection from the dangers that threaten medieval families. William's prayers focus more on his responsibilities as head of household. He asks for strength to complete the spring planting successfully, wisdom to make good decisions about crops and livestock, and protection for his family from the many threats that surround them: disease, famine, violence, and spiritual dangers. These prayers aren't superstitious rituals, but genuine expressions of faith that provide psychological comfort and spiritual strength. Medieval people live with uncertainties that would terrify modern individuals, and their deep religious faith provides the framework for understanding and coping with life's challenges. As the family prepares for sleep, their cottage undergoes its own transformation. The busy workshop atmosphere of daytime gives way to a quieter, more intimate space designed for rest and recovery. Margaret checks the door, ensuring it's properly barred against thieves or dangerous animals. Medieval doors aren't just barriers, but essential security measures in a world where violence and theft are constant possibilities. The heavy wooden bar that slides across the door could stop most intruders, providing crucial time for the family to wake and defend themselves if necessary. She also checks the shutters that cover their single window. During the day, these remain open to provide light for indoor work, but at night they're closed and barred to prevent entry by unwanted visitors, both human and supernatural. Medieval people believe that demons and evil spirits are most active during the hours of darkness, and proper barriers help protect sleeping families from spiritual attack. The fire has burned down to glowing coals that provide gentle warmth without bright light. This ember fire will burn slowly through the night, maintaining comfortable temperature while consuming minimal fuel. The skill of banking a fire properly represents generations of accumulated knowledge about managing heat, light, and fuel in an age without central heating or electric power. In her more prosperous household, Eleanor's evening routine reflects both greater comfort and additional responsibilities. Her house has separate chambers for sleeping, allowing privacy unknown in single-room cottages like William's. Eleanor's bedchamber contains furniture that marks her family's success. Proper wooden bed with rope supports and a feather mattress, linen sheets that are changed regularly, woolen blankets dyed with expensive colors, and even a small chair where she can sit for private prayer or contemplation. Her evening prayers are longer and more elaborate than Margaret's, reflecting both her education and her family's position in the community. Eleanor can read Latin well enough to follow written prayers, and she owns a small book of hours, a prayer book designed for lay people that contains prayers for different times of day and seasons of the year. Tonight she prays particularly for her husband Edmund, who is traveling to London on business and won't return for several days. Travel in medieval England involves serious risks: bad weather, poor roads, thieves and bandits who prey on merchants carrying valuable goods. Eleanor's prayers ask for Edmund's safe journey and successful return with the prophets that maintain their comfortable lifestyle. Throughout Ashwell, similar scenes play out as families prepare for the night ahead. In cottage after cottage, parents tend to children, couples share quiet conversations, and individuals engage in the private prayers that prepare them for sleep. The village itself grows quieter as human activity decreases. The sounds that dominate daytime conversations, working animals, craftsmen's tools. Children playing fade away and are replaced by the subtle sounds of night in a medieval English village. An owl calls from the woods beyond the fields, its haunting voice carrying across the darkness. Dogs bark occasionally, alerting their owners to sounds or smells that human senses can't detect. The distant lowing of cattle and the soft rustling of sheep in their pens create a gentle soundtrack of agricultural life settling into rest. But the village isn't completely silent. Medieval people understand that complete quiet often means danger. The absence of normal animal sounds can indicate the presence of predators or threats that have frightened the usual night creatures into hiding. As the last conversations fade and final prayers are whispered, the families of Ashwell begin their descent into what they call first sleep, the initial phase of rest that medieval people expect to last 3 to 4 hours before natural awakening in the deep of night. Thomas is already breathing deeply beside his parents, his 8-year-old body relaxed in the complete trust of childhood. His dreams will likely be simple and pleasant memories of games with friends, stories told by adults, or fantasies about becoming a brave knight like those in the tales he loves. William lies quietly beside Margaret, feeling the accumulated tiredness of a day spent behind the plow. His muscles ache pleasantly from honest work, and his mind gradually releases the concerns and plans that occupied it throughout the day. Sleep comes easily to those whose bodies are truly tired and whose consciences are clear. Margaret settles beside her husband, pulling their shared woolen blankets up to ward off March's lingering chill. Her hands still feel the rhythm of spinning, the constant motion that has occupied them throughout the day, but gradually even this sensation fades as sleep approaches. In her more comfortable bed, Eleanor also surrenders to the approaching rest. Her feather mattress and linen sheets provide luxury that most villagers can't imagine, but she shares with them the same human need for sleep, dreams, and the restoration that comes with proper rest. As sleep overtakes the village, we witness the beginning of a process that would seem strange to modern eyes. Medieval people don't expect to sleep through until dawn in one unbroken period. Instead, they anticipate waking naturally after 3 or 4 hours for a period of quiet wakefulness before returning to sleep until morning. This segmented sleep pattern is unusual or problematic. It's the normal human rhythm that prevailed for thousands of years before electric lighting and modern scheduling changed our relationship with darkness and rest. Medieval people used this natural awakening for prayer, meditation, intimate conversation, and various domestic tasks that are difficult to accomplish during busy daylight hours. But for now, in these first hours after lying down, their sleep is deep and restorative. This is when their bodies recover from the day's physical labor, when their minds process the experiences and emotions of waking life, and when they enter the mysterious realm of dreams that medieval people believe carries messages from the divine world. The fire burns lower, casting dancing shadows on cottage walls. Outside, the village settles into the quiet rhythms of night, while inside, families rest in the trust that morning will come, bringing new challenges and new opportunities in the endless cycle of medieval life. As their breathing deepens and their consciousness fades, the people of Ashwell join their ancestors and descendants in the universal human experience of surrendering to sleep, that daily death and resurrection that restores our bodies and souls for the work of living. Let yourself drift with them now, feeling the weight of woolen blankets, the warmth of glowing embers, the security of family nearby, and the deep peace that comes from a day's work honestly completed. Feel your own body growing heavy, your own breathing slowing as you join these long-dead villagers in the timeless ritual of human rest. Sleep is coming for them, and for you. Let it come gently, naturally, as it has come to humans for countless generations. Let the worries of your modern world fade like the dying firelight, and sink into the darkness that promises rest, dreams, and the gift of morning still to come. Medieval people believed the midnight hours bring souls closer to God and make prayer more powerful and effective. The distractions of daily life, work, commerce, social obligations, all fade away in darkness, leaving the spirit free to commune with the divine. Father Benedict, the village priest, maintains formal watch in the church, following the monastic practice of midnight prayers called matins. The stone building is lit only by a few candles and oil lamps, creating pools of warm light that barely penetrate the vast darkness of the nave. Tonight, Father Benedict prays particularly for the spiritual welfare of his parishioners. He knows their struggles, their fears, their moral challenges, and he uses the quiet hours of the watch to intercede for them before God. His prayers ask for protection from plague and famine, for justice and peace in the realm, for the salvation of souls entrusted to his care. Some villagers join him for these midnight prayers, quietly entering the church to kneel in the candlelit darkness. Tonight, old Martha the widow comes seeking comfort for the loneliness that has plagued her since her children's deaths. Eleanor arrives seeking guidance about a moral dilemma involving her business practices. Young Peter, William's nephew, prays for courage as he prepares to leave his family's village to seek work elsewhere. The watch also provides opportunities for the physical and emotional intimacy that strengthens medieval marriages. Historical sources, including medical texts from the period, frequently recommend the hours between first and second sleep as ideal for conjugal relations. Medieval physicians believed that bodies were most naturally prepared for procreation during these hours. when the humors were properly balanced and the mind was calm but not drowsy. More practically, the watch provided privacy that was rare in households where families often shared single rooms and daily life involved constant interaction with children, servants, and neighbors. But intimacy during the watch isn't only physical. The quiet hours allow couples to share thoughts, feelings, and experiences that busy daylight schedules don't permit. William and Margaret use this time to discuss their relationship, their shared dreams for the future, and the small daily experiences that bind them together. "I watched you today with Thomas," Margaret tells William quietly. "You're teaching him to see the land the way you do, not just dirt to be plowed, but living soil that must be cared for and respected." William smiles in the firelight. "My father taught me the same way. The land will support us, but only if we understand what it needs from us." Thomas is learning, but it takes time. These conversations create emotional intimacy that sustains medieval marriages through the hardships and uncertainties of their world. Partners who can communicate deeply, share vulnerabilities, and support each other's dreams are better equipped to face the challenges that threaten every medieval family. The medieval night isn't silent, but filled with sounds that modern people rarely hear. As William and Margaret sit beside their fire, they listen to the subtle symphony of nighttime rural life. An owl calls from the woods beyond the village, not the gentle hoo-hoo of children's stories, but the sharp, wild cry of a hunting predator. Dogs bark occasionally, alerting their owners to sounds or scents that human senses can't detect. Cattle low softly in their pens, and sheep rustle as they shift position in their sleep. These sounds aren't background noise, but important information about the safety and security of the village. Sudden silence often indicates the presence of predators, wolves, or human thieves that have frightened the usual night creatures. Unusual animal behavior can warn of storms, illness, or other threats that require attention. Margaret pauses in her spinning to listen as a dog barks persistently near the river. "That's Robert's hound," she murmurs. "Something's troubling him." William nods, also listening. "Could be a fox after the chickens, or travelers passing through. We should remember to ask Robert in the morning." This attentiveness to night sounds represents survival skills that modern people have largely lost. Medieval villagers must be alert to their environment because their safety and prosperity depend on recognizing and responding to subtle changes in the world around them. The activities and atmosphere of the midnight watch change with the seasons, reflecting the agricultural cycles that govern medieval life. Tonight, in March, the watch carries the anticipation and anxiety of spring planting season. William uses part of his watch time to examine seed grain, checking for signs of mold or insect damage that could affect germination. He counts carefully, calculating whether his supplies will last through planting season or whether he will need to purchase additional seed, an expensive necessity that could strain the family's budget. Margaret inspects the stored vegetables, onions, turnips, and cabbages that have sustained them through winter, looking for signs of spoilage that require immediate attention. She also plans her expanded garden for the growing season, deciding where to plant herbs for cooking and medicine, vegetables for food, and flowers for dyeing wool. In summer, the watch might focus on planning harvest activities, while autumn brings attention to preservation, smoking meat, storing grain, preparing for winter scarcities. Winter watches often involve storytelling, craft work, and the maintenance activities that prepare equipment for spring's renewal. Eleanor's prosperity allows her to use watch time for activities unavailable to poorer families. Tonight, she works by expensive candlelight to update the records of her husband's wool business, calculating profits from recent sales, planning purchases for the coming wool season, and maintaining the careful accounts that track their growing wealth. Medieval business requires detailed record keeping, particularly for merchants who deal with customers in multiple towns and villages. Eleanor must track which customers have paid their debts, which suppliers provide the best quality materials, and which markets offer the highest prices for different types of wool and cloth. She also uses the quiet hours to plan charitable activities that demonstrate her family as prosperity, while fulfilling Christian obligations to help the poor. This isn't just moral duty, but practical social policy. Generous treatment of less fortunate neighbors builds goodwill and support that might prove essential during future difficulties. Tonight she decides to sponsor new clothes for several village children whose families can't afford proper garments. This charity will require significant expense purchasing wool, hiring seamstresses, and coordinating fittings, but it will also demonstrate Eleanor's piety and social responsibility. As the watch continues, medieval people gradually begin to feel the natural drowsiness that signals readiness for second sleep. This isn't forced or hurried, but a gentle transition that recognizes the body's own rhythms and needs. William carefully banks the fire for the remainder of the night, arranging logs and covering them with ash to ensure slow burning without waste or danger. Margaret completes her current spinning project and puts away her tools in their proper places. Together, they whisper final prayers, asking for protection through the remaining hours of darkness. Thomas has slept undisturbed through their entire watch, his child's body taking the continuous rest it needs for growth and development. His parents settle quietly beside him, pulling their woolen blankets close against March's lingering chill. Eleanor completes her business calculations and extinguishes her expensive candles, carefully saving the remaining wax for future use. She settles into her comfortable feather bed, offering private prayers for her traveling husband's safety and her family's continued prosperity. Throughout the village, other families complete their own watch activities and prepare to return to sleep. The community that connected them through shared wakefulness now prepares for the shared rest that will carry them through the remaining hours, until dawn. As second sleep approaches, the village grows quieter once again. The activities of the watch fade into memory, but their effects, the prayers offered, the work completed, the conversations shared, will influence the coming day and the ongoing life of the community. Let yourself drift with them now, feeling the satisfaction of the watch's quiet productivity, the peace of prayers offered, and the comfort of intimate conversations completed. Feel your own body growing heavy once more, your own breathing slowing. As you join these medieval villagers in the gentle transition from wakefulness back to the restorative realm of sleep. The second sleep is different from the first, often lighter, filled with dreams that medieval people believe carry meaning and guidance. But it's equally important, providing the final hours of rest needed to face another day of medieval life with energy, hope, and the strength that comes from proper restoration. Close your eyes as they close theirs and sink into the quiet darkness that promises dreams, peace, and the gift of morning still to come.